On today's Patriot Nation podcast, we are joined by the one and only Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston. You know him, you love him. We're here to break down the playoff matchup against the Buffalo Bills. It's a heck of a show, so buckle up and cue the music. All right, Phil, you're one of our favorite guests, probably arguably our favorite guest, definitely the best looking guy in Boston sports media. We talked about this already. It's true. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedule with your 96 shows on NBC Sports Boston. And we can't get enough of the content, so that's why we had to bring you on with us too.
You guys know I love coming on with you. Happy to talk with you anytime, especially this week. I love that we get to finish off this trilogy this week because I've loved this matchup every time we've had it, whether the weather's a factor or not. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot as familiar as it is for all of us. It is a fun matchup, so I'm psyched to talk about it with you guys.
Yeah, and I was obviously, everyone was watching that game Sunday night to kind of figure out who they wanted, who the Patriots are going to play. And, you can make the case that Cincinnati maybe is a little bit of a more favorable matchup for the Patriots simply because of the inexperience on their side, Taylor versus Belichick, however, how much stock you take and stuff like that. But I was rooting for this. I think it's great for football. It's great for the rivalry, right? I mean, they split 1-1. The Bills came into Gillette, stole the division. I think this be a nice little cherry on top. You win 2 out of 3, you get the bragging rights going into next year. And I also think it's big for their future, right? Because Bills get Tom Brady out of town, 20 years. They finally think they can run the AFC East. And then boom, here comes, Mac Jones and a new era of Patriots and kind of start knocking on their door of a division that they thought, that they could run for the next, 5 to 10 years. So yeah, interesting. I don't know your take on, and I know Bill was asked about it and some of the players this week about the film familiarity and how much that, may factor into the game. I don't know. What's your take on that? Is that big, you think, in a game this magnitude?
Well, I think it helps your preparation, but it helps on both sides, right? I mean, the Bills are as familiar with you as you are with them. And, what's nice about it is you don't have to rely on, some advanced scouting of a team like the Bengals, who you hadn't planned to see all year, that they hadn't seen in person as of about a week ago. And that's something they typically would like to do before a potential matchup, get that sort of in-person exposure. But with the Bills, you don't have to worry about that. So there's a lot of ground that they can cover without having to actually cover it this week as they prepare. The personnel, the scheme, the coaching staff. It's all about on this specific night, this specific matchup with all the injuries, now fresh in people's minds and being able to adjust for whatever those are. I think you can kind of dial in your game plan a little bit more specifically than you would in a normal week, or certainly against an opponent that you hadn't yet seen. So not only did you see the Bills twice, but you saw them twice late in the season, right? Just a couple weeks apart. So I think that part of their prep will be pretty easy to clear if it hasn't been cleared already, as we sit here Tuesday night, and you can get really into the nitty gritty about all of the details that you want to hit starting early in the week. So I think it helps. It just makes it a different kind of prep. I don't know who it benefits. If we're talking about the matchup specifically, I do think this Bills team is just the more talented team. I think their defense does not get enough credit, guys. They've gotten run over at times this year, no doubt about it, whether it's Colts or the Titans or the Patriots at home. So, that's something that could benefit them, New England, but their defense is legit. When I checked last, I think they were number 1 in the league in DVOA. Like they are.
That's what David Andrews said too. And I had to check it because I was like, but they are. Yeah.
So they are legit, and they're going to do some things that are going to confuse Mac Jones. And, we talked about it on the breakdown last night. Myself and Ted Johnson, that cover 2 trap coverage, whatever you want to call it, where they kind of baited Mac Jones into making a bad decision. That's the kind of thing that the Bills live on, right? They mix up their coverages. They play zone. They play man. They've got versatile defensive backs. They make it hard on opposing quarterbacks. They made it really hard on Mac Jones here at Gillette Stadium just a few weeks ago. Less than 50% completions. It was a slog through the air for the Patriots in that game. And so their defense has to be on point, and they're going to have to run the football. It's going to have to be the formula that we've known they've needed all year long to beat good teams. You're going to need that formula on steroids this week, because I don't think you can really lean on your passing game this week. You have to know that going in. If it becomes a passing game for New England's offense, I think they're going to be up a creek.
I mean, you talk formula, and the formula for them, I think step one is avoid the slow start. And everybody in the world has talked about slow starts this week. It's Tuesday, and we've all heard it a million times. How do you think they can avoid that? And against Buffalo, a team that they've seen twice already in the past 6 weeks, do you think it helps that they've seen them, or maybe it hurts them that Buffalo, has an idea of how they want to attack?
Here's my solution, Keegan. Smelling salts. Load up.
Love it.
Load up on the smelling salts. All right, let's just get it going. I don't know if it's the pregame meal. I don't know if it's the pregame speeches. I have no idea what it is. But you've got to figure out a way to just have a little bit more energy to start these games. That's what's most alarming to me. It's not that the execution's not great. It's the energy, the focus, the self-inflicted mistakes. If you just get beat by a team that's more talented than you, that's one thing. When you show up the way you did in Indy, or the way you did at home against the Bills, and I talked to people in the organization that night when they were playing Buffalo, second time around, and they were just baffled at the start. Baffled, because it was one of those situations where you say to yourself, if we didn't learn from what happened in Indy just a week ago, when we went into their place, it's a fine team. It's a good team. It's not a great team. And we know that now. They don't even make the playoffs. And they had the second best quarterback of the night on that side, even with Mac Jones throwing 2 picks that night in Indy. What I was told is, if we didn't learn from that game, what are we doing here?
Right.
How can we start with this kind of energy? It was inexcusable. And then they do it again in Miami a couple weeks later. So I have no idea how to explain it. I don't think they know how to explain it. It's
not hard to get up for a game like this too, especially in all those ones you mentioned. Maybe week 18, right? Like you kind of figure it's a place you've had struggles before, and it's tough with week 18. Okay, if that's the first time, but Buffalo, Indy, like how do you not get up for those games, especially this Saturday?
Even the Miami game. I mean, the division's still on the line. It's still up for grabs.
Yeah. Especially halfway through the third quarter, it looks. Maybe
that's a clearly inferior team. It's not a good offense. You let them drive down the field and score easily on a busted coverage deep in the red zone. And then you come back and on your first pass, first third down in the game, you throw a pick 6. I mean, you can't draw it up any worse. That's what's alarming to me. That's what gives me pause with this team going into the playoffs, where obviously every game you play, if you play more than one, is going to be against a good team. And I feel like we haven't seen them play a good team at their best. Every time they play a good team, they shoot themselves in the foot. So I have no idea what to expect from this team. If they play a clean game, I still feel like they can beat probably anybody in the conference. I still believe that. Maybe I'm a dummy for feeling that way.
No,
but it's hard for me to say that with any confidence because we haven't seen them do it. So that's what gives me pause with this team moving forward.
And you said it, on Tom's podcast that came out, Tommy Karn's podcast, about how like they're just small things, and if they can fix those small things, then they can. And it's like, but you just keep saying that all they got to do is fix these small things, and it's like they just don't fix them. And I think the play that's so indicative for me, I think it was the first drive of the game against Buffalo, where they throw a little flat route to Devin Singletary, and Kyle Duggar goes over there and gets dragged 9 yards. And Singletary picks up a first down, and Collins comes over to hit him and gets blasted too. It was just like, what are we doing here? It's Devin Singletary. He's on the sideline. Just push him out of bounds. And he gets dragged for a first down. It's one of those ones where you're kind of like, what in the world are you doing? And it just so indicative of their lack of energy and lack of focus at the beginning of the game.
And I don't know what that is. Is it, is there a confidence issue with them right now? I wouldn't blame them if there was. I think they were the most confident team in football leaving Buffalo the last time they were there, right? That was the loudest locker room I'd heard as a Patriots beat person following them on the road. We haven't been obviously in the locker room, since COVID hit, but as far as being right outside and hearing everything that's going on in there, man, they were whooping it up. And they should be, right? That's the epitome of like a toughness win, grind it out, division opponent, puts you in the driver's seat. You're the number 1 seed. You're going into your bye, and you just showed the entire world on Monday Night Football that you are the baddest team on the planet. You don't even need to throw the football to beat a good team on the road. You just stomp on their faces and win. And I think that's how they felt. And they came back after a week off, maybe feeling sorry for themselves a little bit, as Mac Jones told us, because it wasn't as long a bye week as they wanted. It was a late bye, and listen, I get that, but the fact that that's even creeping into their brains, I think, is a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
And then you show up and you don't show up. First quarter, second quarter against Indianapolis. I think there's a little bit of the way I termed it after the loss to Buffalo was a little bit of an identity crisis, because I think they thought they were one thing leaving Buffalo, and then a couple weeks later, it was like their world came crashing down on them. And I know Bill Belichick said the other day they don't lack for confidence, and I believe that they believe they can beat anyone when they play cleanly, but even they don't have all that much evidence that they can play cleanly, that they can put it all together against a good team. So they're going to have to do it for the first time, really, almost all season, right? I mean, think about their quote-unquote good wins. I think their best win during their winning streak was the Chargers, who ended up not even making the playoffs. I shouldn't say that. I think we all kind of like used that Bills win as like an outlier because it was such a weird game. That's their best win. But outside of that, it was the Chargers, and they're not even a playoff team. So I wouldn't blame them if there was like a little bit of a shaky confidence thing going on right now.
Right, and the Browns didn't get in, which was a convincing win. The Titans game was a convincing win, but they were without Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio. So like all the teams that they played in there, even if they were playoff teams, were sidelined, right? And the Browns didn't have Chubb or Hunt, right? So it was like, yeah, you played some of these teams, and the Browns, of course, didn't even make the playoffs, but like, you play some of these teams, but still they're not at full health when you play them anyway. So, that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can certainly see where your confidence could be a little shot because you're like, well, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were,
Well, and I think, when you really look closely at some of those games, even the convincing wins, I would leave the Browns out of this, but I can think of a couple, like the Titans game. The Titans game was a game for a full half, even though they basically brought a JV squad to Gillette Stadium that day.
Yep.
I did not think that was one of Mac Jones' best games. He had a very good game statistically, but when you look closely at his play that day, I just didn't think
he was off on a lot. Yeah.
And, against a team like that, that's really shorthanded, that's missing guys, you can get away with some mistakes, and it can still look good at the end of the day. Against a good team, fully staffed, it's hard to get away with those things, right? They turn into pick sixes that put you down 14-0, or it turns into a second interception against Indy, and now you're down multiple scores, and now you're scratching and clawing to try to come back. So, even the Atlanta game, they went 25-0, right? On the road. That's a nothing road crowd. I would say the stands were half filled. It was an incredibly strange night from that perspective. But they got a pick six from Kyle Van Noy late in that game. You scored in the teens against a defense that's not very good, that doesn't have much of anything in the way of star power. AJ Terrell, he's an impressive young corner. And I didn't think that was a great game from the Patriots offense and from the Patriots young quarterback. So, I think they got away with some things that maybe flew under the radar for us because the teams they were playing were shorthanded or just weren't very good. When they play good teams, this team's margin for error is very, very slim. They have to play cleanly. They have to take care of the football. They have to play lights out defensively. And when they don't do those things, not only will they lose to the good teams, they'll lose to the mediocre teams, which I would say Miami is, which I would say Indianapolis ended up. So that's got to be the concern moving forward, is if you don't play clean, because those margins are so slim, you're going to be going home early.
Yeah.
You mentioned fully staffed. I just want to get this in real quick. Buffalo feels like the healthiest divisional champ that we've seen in a while. That, like, what do they have injury wise? Just looking on paper, the Patriots have a couple things hit them this week with Wynn leaves the game, Barmore leaves the game. Things are looking up there, but then Mills today put on the COVID list. Who knows if he's going to be able to get back? So to break it down a little bit for you, just one question: How do they replace Jalen Mills if he isn't able to go on Saturday? Who's the guy that steps up? Because we've seen Joan Williams they don't even want him on the field at times.
Here's and I never thought I would say this as one of maybe the biggest Jalen Mills detractors before the season started. Here's what's scary about not having Jalen Mills. Never thought I'd say that. If they don't have Jalen Mills, right?
Right.
I guess, we'll leave open the possibility that he's able to come back. He's able to test out. If they don't have Jalen Mills, I think the response would be Jawan Williams opposite JC Jackson outside. So number one, that to me would be a concern because Jawan Williams has just simply not been very good when he's been given opportunities. And there's a reason we haven't seen very much of him. Actually, the last time we saw him in a critical spot outside of this past weekend against Miami, where they were shorthanded in the secondary, was in Buffalo. And JC Jackson came out for a snap or two, and Jawan Williams ends up on Stephon Diggs.
Oh, God.
And from a Patriots perspective, thank God there were 50-mile-an-hour winds because Stephon Diggs beat Jawan Williams easily, and he had a pass just clang off his hands in the end zone, what I thought was a great, maybe the best throw of the night from Josh Allen.
Yep.
But they saw that he wasn't in the game. It was the second snap, I think, Jawan Williams was in the game. They found the matchup. They said, we got Jawan Williams out here on our best receiver. All right. Go deep, Steph. Let's see what happens. And they should have had a touchdown on that play. So that's number one. That's a concern. But number two is I think schematically it hurts you because you can't end up with that matchup. So to me, that means you can't play zone. Like you can't risk playing zone and end up with Stephon Diggs on Jawan Williams because you're asking for a big play, right? So now you're playing man. Okay, the Patriots want to play man anyway, right? The issue playing man and playing man consistently against a really athletic quarterback, we saw it against the Dolphins this past weekend.
Yep.
We saw it against the Bills. The risk is your eyes are turned because you're running with receivers down the field and you're letting arguably the best athlete on the field, pound for pound, and Josh Allen have wide open rushing lanes because nobody's watching him in the secondary. And if he gets through the defensive line and the linebacker level, he's off and running for 25, 30 yards. And the Patriots front against some of these quarterbacks hasn't been all that disciplined in terms of keeping these guys in the pocket. I think Matt Judon has been one of their worst offenders lately.
It's been awful.
So it's a trickle down effect. Okay, you think it's just Jalen Mills, it's not going to make or break anybody. Okay, right? Well, if it ends up changing what they have to do schematically, and now you have to get away from some of the zone stuff that you had done through the middle part of the year when you were really, really good defense, and now it's all man all the time, and you've got those guys locked down, all Josh Allen needs is a little crease with guys man-to-man eyes as opposed to quote-unquote zone eyes, and you have an explosive player in your hands. That to me is a little bit of a scary thought for the Patriots.
Well, and that's the thing to think about with Mills is that he was brought in to be the third or fourth wide or fourth corner because Gilmore was on the team at the time, John Jones on the team at the time, and so he gets thrust in the number 2 spot, of course, which is not good. But now you're talking about if he's out, now you're looking at the 5th or 6th option at cornerback is playing the number 2, and against a team like Buffalo that has Gabe Davis, who will be back this week, who didn't play against the Patriots in Week 16. Beasley will be back this week. He didn't play Week 16, and Diggs on top of that, and Dawson Knox who can catch the ball at tight end. Like that's not good. It's not a good thing.
I honestly, guys, would think about instead of using Jawan Williams, and I'm not sure they would ever do this. I would think about using Crevon LeBlanc, who they just signed to their practice. Today. 2016
UDFA. He was like, I loved that guy, and they let him go, and he balled out for the Bears his first year there, few years, and then he's been since. But
I just and maybe he's better suited for the slot. Okay, you want to play him inside,
right?
I'd throw Miles Bryant outside before I play Jawan Williams outside. If Sean Wade is healthy, I might use him. I can't see how they would feel confident in what Jawan Williams can do out there because even the positive moments that he had in training camp, they oftentimes were had against N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry, as nice a camp as
former first-round pick.
I know the Patriots were happy with the camp that N'Keal Harry had, and it was talking to people's. Well, why would we release him? Look at the plays he's making this summer. I don't know. He's making those plays on Juwan Williams, and those guys went back and forth. And there were days where Juwan Williams was the better player. There were days where N'Keal Harry was the better player. Turns out neither of them are very good, right? So, like, I just in your biggest game, I understand you not wanting to trust somebody who either just came in or is a practice squad player or isn't necessarily suited body type wise to play in a certain area. But Juwan Williams has put together a body of evidence that would suggest he's not the answer. So it would surprise me if they leaned on him, but they're in a spot right now, guys, where they're just so thin they may feel like they have to.
The thing with the Bills too is like, and part of it makes me, somewhat confident in this game is I feel like Josh Allen needs to almost be all world to really beat them, right? Like they beat themselves at one of the worst Patriots games of the year, a few weeks ago, and they were a pick from J.C. Jackson away from potentially winning that game, right? And that was arguably Josh Allen's best game of his career. I think if he's half of that, I think it's the advantage to New England, especially given the conditions that will be in on Saturday, whether you factor that in or not. I just think he's going to have to be just as good as he was, a few weeks ago for them to be successful.
I think that was his best game, Spags. I given the stakes, right? You factor those in on the road against a good defense, which the Patriots were, they were great. I still think they're a good defense. But they were a great defense at the time. That's what we were thinking of, how we were thinking of them. And for him to play the way he played, I mean, sidestepping pressure, stepping up in the pocket, throwing accurately down the field, taking care of the football for the most part. He was dynamite in that game. I thought that was his cleanest performance in a big spot that he's probably ever had. Hurt them with his legs, hurt them through the air. I mean, he did everything. That was the pinnacle of what Josh Allen can be when he's right. I don't foresee that happening again. Not only because, law of averages, but because it's going to be so freaking cold. I mean, it's going to be hard for him to throw in Buffalo. It sounds like the wind's not necessarily going to be a factor. It sounds like there's not necessarily going to be a lot of snow, but it's going to be 0 degrees. I mean, we're going to be well below freezing. I just think it's going to be difficult for him to make hay through the air the same way he did in Foxborough a few weeks ago. Now it's going to be tough for Mac Jones too. So you got to hope that the score is just held in the teens and you can run your way to a win. But I don't see him having the same kind of performance. The only issue would be, right, I think we still think of the Patriots as the tougher team. If you watch that game at Gillette Stadium, I'm not sure you would say that at the end of the game. And Pat, you brought up the play at the start, and I think it's a great one to bring up. Kyle Duggar goes for a ride. I think it was Dante Hightower, actually. So you got two of your most explosive hitters on probably the smallest guy on the field, Devin Singletary. And he runs through both of them. Makes a statement. Patriots did not look like the tougher team that day. So they need to find, some good juju in Buffalo. And maybe a trip to Buffalo is all they need. I mean, again, last time they were there, they thought they were the best team in football. But, what we've seen from them lately, it's got to be hard for them to watch the film and feel good about their ability to just out-tough, out-physical a team. I think they probably know it's somewhere in there. And going back to Buffalo may remind them that they can do it. Maybe that's what they need for their confidence level. But right now, it might be hard for them to get into that space.
Yeah. Keegan, I know you have something, but before you do, if you haven't seen this already, Phil, I know you've seen it, but if you're listening to the podcast, you haven't seen it, pause the podcast. Obviously, we're live right now, but if you're listening, on your phone or whatever, pause the podcast right now and Google Cravon LeBlanc Patriots interception. His interception in the preseason in 2016 is one of the single best catches I've ever seen in my entire life. That one catch, I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to be amazing. And of course, whatever, he was at UDFA, but they end up cutting him and he goes over the Bears and he played decently for the Bears. But that one interception, I was like, oh my God, that catch was outrageous. So if you haven't seen it, Google it right now.
I love that. That's a great callback. That was a long time ago now, 2016. Man, we're getting old.
I know.
5 years ago, I didn't think it was that long ago. I thought for sure, guys,
he Brady off a few years ago, right? Too in Houston.
I think he did. Yeah.
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 He I thought was guaranteed to make the team because it wasn't just that play. He was making plays in training camp. He was always getting his hands on the football. But the decision they made that year is one that I will never forget, and it has always colored, my any 53-man roster projection you see from me.
Yep.
You see a lot of special teamers in there.
Was it Bad Mosey?
Well, so no, I thought the decision that year was between LeBlanc and John Jones. And we saw John Jones, kind of working to the side with Matthew Slater and I think it was Joe Judge at the time. And it's like, okay, and we knew about his background. He's from Auburn. He runs like 4.3. Really impressive. But he wasn't making as many plays as LeBlanc was. Like LeBlanc was like getting out there and showing up like on a daily basis, it felt like. But that decision that they went with John Jones over Cravon.
Right call.
It was the right call, number one. Number two, from there on out, anytime there's a guy who looks like a big-time special teams contributor as an undrafted rookie who's going to be kind of like a reserve player, is not going to come in and start right away, always go with that guy in your projections over the other guy. It doesn't matter how many plays he's made. Go with the special teamer. That decision was made for me at that point.
And that's kind of what D'Angelo Ross is doing now too. He's kind of been thrown into some spots because of the depth there too. And he had an injury too, I believe. But he's working his way in. He's
a guy that's stuck for like 2.5 years at this point on the practice squad, on and off. And you guys know I like to throw things at the wall and see if they stick. Devontae Bosby, he's been on the practice squad like all year, I feel like, since halfway through the year. Maybe they give him the call up. Who knows? I just wanted to throw that at the wall.
You never know. You never know. I mean, they've been great at finding these unheralded corners and turning them into something, right? So
Keegan knows every team's practice squad, every single player on every single team's practice squad. Keegan knows.
I have to differentiate myself from other people. That's how I do it.
We love you for random. We love you for that, Keegan.
Torrey Hunter, his son got a workout today. Very excited about it. I'd love to see Torrey Hunter's son in a Patriots uniform.
Right? Money.
Jesse Tuggle. Dude, did you know that Phil, that Jesse Tuggle's son was Grady Jarrett? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Keegan said that today on Twitter. I was like, "What? He's Jesse Tuggle's son? What are you talking about?" Unbelievable.
It could not make more sense.
Again,
Jesse Tuggle's
true.
We're getting old, guys.
Yeah,
Phil, talk about getting old. You know that 2020. I mean, I'm sure you saw this online. 2020 is the same distance from 2000 as 1978 was. 2022 was the same distance from 2000 as 1978 was.
Oh, wow. That hurts.
Think about that.
Try to think about that.
Right. So, I mean, obviously we weren't born in 1978, but like still, it's just like 2000. I was a sophomore in high school. So I'm like, I'm old, man. Meanwhile, Spags wasn't even born yet. But anyways, keep going.
Back to football. Postseason time. I think, it's evident that Buffalo is much more comfortable letting Josh Allen run the football than, say, the first matchup when it was freezing cold and the wind was whipping around. They didn't really give him the opportunity to do that. So with him, they're going to let it all hang out, right? Who do you think's a guy that they can put in the field to keep him not just contained, but from breaking off these huge runs? Because we know he can do it. And all of the guys that you would think have just shown that they refuse to keep containment in the pocket. They won't do it. So who's the guy on the roster they can throw out there and have him do that?
Well, so number one, you've got to just try to do a better job. I mean, you can't say this is who we are. We're just a team that gets up the field and leaves wide open running lanes for athletic quarterbacks. So whether it's Kyle Van Noy or Matt Judon or Christian Barmore, if somehow he plays, I still, as of right now, we'll practice this tomorrow, and he was only limited on the projected injury report today, but Lord, feels like what we saw from him that it was feels like kind of a long shot that it'll actually be really effective. But whoever it is, number one, you've got to be disciplined. But that said, something that they have done in the past with Josh Allen, again, because they like to play so much man-to-man, is they've used a linebacker as somewhat of a spy. And it has been a linebacker. And the guy that I'm thinking of is Jamie Collins. Now, maybe it's Kyle Van Noy because he's got just a bigger role in this defense. I think those guys are viewed as almost interchangeable types of pieces. They could play on the edge. They could play at the second level. They're pretty athletic. But Collins, I can remember a few years ago being the choice in that regard to just shadow Allen. And you may see them sort of insert themselves in the rush at the start of the play. And then once they are accounted for by an offensive lineman, then you see them drop out and just read the quarterback. And, that's one way to kind of, number one, occupy an offensive lineman so that he's not, maybe double teaming another player who is supposed to be part of your pass rush. But number two, you get those eyes on the quarterback that you need. If everybody else is in man and everybody else is focused on their assignment, you have to have somebody that's tracking that quarterback because he's such a run threat. So to me, it would be maybe Collins. Athletically, if you were going for like a 1-for-1 or you're going for like a little bit better option, because I think Allen's probably more athletic than Collins, as athletic as Collins is, it would probably be Kyle Duggar. But I think you probably need Duggar in coverage, right, whether it's on Singletary or whether it's on Dawson Knox. You're probably going to see some sort of exchange of responsibilities between Phillips and Duggar on Knox and Singletary or whoever the back is. So I think it's probably going to come down to one of these linebackers. It'll probably be Kyle Van Noy or Jamie Collins.
That's why I threw Uche out there, because I feel like his role is just...
Could be Uche.
He played 5 snaps last week. They were all pass rush snaps. He ended up getting a coverage sack, but that's a guy that he's just not playing right now.
He's not, and it could be him because, again, great athleticism, right? He's faster than either of the guys that I just mentioned. And if you have him out there and you want to only do that in those obvious passing situations, he'd be a good choice for that. I think that's how he's viewed right now, though, is
right,
pass situations only. Because if you've got him on the edge and it's a run situation and you set the edge, tackle, or even a tight end, I'm not sure they feel real comfortable with him in that spot right now. The same way they don't feel real comfortable with Chase Winovich in that spot right now. So
I was just going to say,
those guys are viewed as sub-rushers, right?
Yeah, I thought all offseason too, because he popped a little bit. I knew he was banged up a little bit last year, but I thought Uche would have a much bigger role this year. And I know, Collins came back and Van Noy, some of those guys that, like you said, can play on the edge, play in the second level, a little bit of what he'd offer too. Obviously have a little bit more experience. But I'm still interested to see when kind of they let him loose or he kind of carves out a role for himself going forward, because I liked what he saw last year, but this year it's been, I guess, a sophomore slump. He's had a tough time getting on the field.
Well, he had a great camp. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I thought so too.
The reason he's not playing is because of him. Like this, different positions, different situations, but it sort of takes me back to the conversation of, Damian Harris when he's a rookie, right? People are wondering, why isn't Harris playing? What's going on? Like, why can't we get this guy on the field? Because their offense was not very good that year, 2019. But the easy answer was Sony Michel is available. He hasn't been hurt. And when Sony Michel is available, they want Sony Michel out there. I think right now on the edge, when Matt Judon's available, when Kyle Van Noy's available, they want those guys on the field. Like, there's no reason to get Josh Uche out there because they just like those other guys better. They think those guys are better than Josh Uche right now. So I think that's part of the reason. I mean, he dealt with some injury this year too, but I think that's what you're looking at. I'm not sure it's anything Josh Uche has done or hasn't done. I think it's, well, we've got these other 2 players that are just better than Josh right now. So unless something happens with those guys, and to me, Judon looks like not himself. And so, that would be
I don't know what's going on.
Maybe get Josh Uche out there a little bit more, but he has totally disappeared over the course of last month. I mean, he hasn't had a quarterback hit or a sack since they were in Buffalo. It was week 13. We're week 19 now. So for somebody who was arguably not just the MVP of the defense, but the MVP of the team for the vast majority of the season, to not really be making plays, it makes everything harder. Again, margin for error, very slim. When your defense isn't performing the way you would expect it to, and specifically when the best players on your defense aren't performing the way you would expect them to, it's going to be really hard for them to win. So J.C. Jackson needs to have a great game on Saturday. Matt Judon, to me, needs to have a great game on Saturday. That's what you need to continue on to stay alive in the tournament, because it's in all likelihood, it's not going to be the rookie quarterback that carries you. It's going to need to be the defense that carries you. And for the defense to play well, they need the pass rush to be there. They need Matt Judon to be there. Honestly, they really need Christian Barmore to be there. Those two guys, Judon and Barmore together, changed the way they were able to play defense. And if both of those guys aren't themselves against Buffalo, I think it's going to be really hard for them to win there.
And before kind of we let you go and wrap up, I need to ask you a question. I've always meant to ask you kind of when I see you in person, just to kind of get your opinion on it. But Jonnu Smith, what's the deal with him? Because I always felt like, and not to compare him to the player, because I think there's, he hasn't helped himself much either, but in a sense of a little bit with N'Keal Harry, right? Like the fit maybe not there. They might not be utilizing him in the right way. Like I always felt with N'Keal, scheme touches and getting the ball to him in space and letting him make plays with the ball in his hand was the best way to kind of get him going, right? You didn't really have a quarterback that could throw the jump ball and play outside the numbers. What's the deal with Jonnu? Because you've seen him, take some jet sweeps and, line up in the backfield a little bit, but it seems like as a pass catcher, I don't know if he's just not catching on as fast as maybe they had expected, but this is a guy who can certainly help your offense, certainly help your football team. And it just seems like there's just not a lot of connection there with him in the playbook and Mac Jones. I don't know what it is with him, but it would be nice to get him going this late in the year. I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, you spend all that money on a guy like that, and he's getting 3, maybe 4 targets a game.
It's been less than that lately, right? I mean, last week they could have used him last week in Miami. 1 touch, 1 carry, 5 yards.
And that's where I come in with N'Keal. Like, it's like, is it him or is it just they're not getting him the ball? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand it.
I think it starts with him, and they're not getting him the ball because of what's going on with him, right?
Behind the
scenes,
yeah.
I think it was pretty telling when Josh McDaniels a few weeks ago called it sort of a foundational year, I think is how he termed it with Jonnu Smith, meaning he's still trying to get it. And there's clearly a lack of comfort, lack of confidence whenever he's targeted down the field. I mean, if you guys have noticed, especially lately, when he's getting targeted now, it's bubble screens.
Yep.
It's short passes. It's quick hitting stuff. Down the field stuff has been completely uncomfortable. And I would say, borderline dangerous because
Saints game.
It's not just him, right? Like Mac Jones targeted him twice down the seam in Indianapolis. I think in both instances, probably not a great decision on the quarterback's part because he kind of was throwing into a crowd. But there's something going on with Jonnu Smith that I think makes it difficult for him to just track the football down the field. There's a disconnect between seeing it, getting his hands ready for it, and actually completing the catch down the field. On these short passes, he's okay. But, I go back to the Saints game and the pick 6 right off his hands in that Saints game that really changed the game right at the start of the second half there. I think from then on, I think he's been scrambling for some confidence. And, from that point, you understand as the Patriots that, okay, we can't rely on him as part of our passing game. We can incorporate him in our passing game, and he can be a piece, but he's not going to be a go-to type of player for us. And anytime we do get it to him, it's got to be schemed. So it's a handoff, it's a pitch, it's a toss, it's a screen. I think that's just where they are with him right now, and they're hoping in his second off season with the team. This is a guy who, just as a quick aside, for people who don't value OTAs, and that used to be a regular conversation late in Brady's tenure here, he did not go to OTAs. He went to mandatory minicamp, which everyone did. He got hurt on the first day of mandatory minicamp. So he basically got 1 day in the spring with the Patriots. And I don't know if having more days in the spring would have made him more comfortable and would have shored up his hands and would have made him a bigger factor this season. But watching him now, it feels like it couldn't have hurt. So I think he's the ultimate. If Patriots coaches want to go to their guys who are either, they're free agents who are just recently acquired or they're veteran players that they're trying to encourage to come to the spring, that would be the first player I would bring up. And maybe you wouldn't do it while he's still on the roster, but you say to these guys, listen, this guy decided not to come all spring and he didn't get it. It took him a full year because that's just what it looks like to me right now. He's just not where he needs to be able to contribute consistently.
I mean, remember that they signed him first, and then the next day they signed Hunter Henry. I mean, imagine what this offense would look like if they had only signed Jonnu Smith and not Hunter Henry, who Henry's been basically shut out for the last 4 weeks. But well, not Indianapolis, but outside of Indy,
Henry was pretty good late in the game the other day.
That's true.
Yeah,
that is true. You're right.
Field. But you're right. I mean, it's when you don't have a lot. Like, we haven't really talked that much about Mac tonight, but they don't have a ton of dynamic playmakers. They're better off than they were last year. But I think that's one reason for why Mac is where he is and where he's been for the last month. I think primarily it's him. Right. I'm not blaming the weapons for the pick six, or for the fumble, or for the 2 picks in Indy, or for the pick in Buffalo. Like, I think it's mostly him. But if you had a go-to guy on third down, or you had a real explosive dynamic threat when you're playing from behind, I think it could make the rookie quarterback's life a lot easier. I had a tweet earlier today. Tucker Boynton does a great job tweeting all sorts of sort of advanced numbers, especially when it relates to quarterbacks across the league. He threw up a great comp today, which is one that I've looked at in the past, which is Joe Burrow's rookie season and Mac Jones's rookie season. Pretty similar there. I think right now you're seeing a huge leap from Joe Burrow, in part because the weaponry around him is so dynamic. He's gotten better too. There's no doubt about that, especially when pressured. He's been phenomenal when pressured this season. I don't know how consistent that will be moving forward in his career, but he has the best receiving core in the NFL, arguably. Mac Jones doesn't have that right now. And so, had Jonnu Smith worked out, I think you'd be seeing a little bit more consistent performance to end the year from the rookie quarterback.
So that was a professional segue by you, Phil, because I wanted to bring up this tweet by NBC Sports Boston, your employer, by the way, saying, that wasn't
a great
tweeted
station. It's a great website. Just want to say that.
They tweeted out today, for those of you that haven't seen it, if Mac Jones struggles early Saturday night in the frigid Buffalo conditions, should the Patriots let Brian Hoyer play a series or two? Was a poll, which, by the way,
Stiddy's time finally.
22% of people, of the 19,000 people that voted, 22% said yes, which is complete insanity. But what in the world? What the hell is that?
Phil, you want me to take this one?
I wish I could.
Stidham's time.
I wish I could tell you. Listen, maybe the fact that 22% of the people responded the way it tells you that it was banging around in somebody's brain at our offices and need them.
Right.
Hey, let's get this.
They need Cam back. That's what those are the Cam guys.
All right, let's shift gears. Let's stay on topic, but also shift gears and just talk about Mac. Right.
By the way, that's 4,000 people for you math people out there. 4,000 people said yes. Play Brian Hoyer if Mac Jones struggle. 4,000. Yikes. I mean, anyways,
4,000. And you know what? I understand it if people are not that people are choosing Brian Hoyer over Mac Jones. I don't understand that. I understand, though, the people who have questions about the rookie quarterback now because of the way he's handled the last month of the season. And because, again, to me, the errors are self-inflicted on his part. It's not that the protection's been a disaster, as it was the first month of the season. If he played this way the first month of the season, we'd all be looking at it and saying, well, look, the guy's on pace to set a record in terms of quarterback hits absorbed. Like, you'd be throwing picks left and right, too, if you were facing the pressure that he was facing on a weekly basis. But that hasn't been the case. The offensive line's been okay. The running game has been okay. The weapons, while not out of this world, are relatively healthy and available. Henry's around. Jacoby Myers is around. Kendrick Bourne is around. Like, I think he's gotten tired. It's really the only explanation I have, guys, because to me, in terms of the decision-making stuff, he's making mistakes that he was not making early in the season. And maybe part of that is that the rest of the league has a better idea of how to defend him now. I thought it was really interesting. The Hard Knocks episode that came out after the Colts game. You know, they followed the Colts obviously in season. You had defensive coaches, Dave Borgonzi's linebackers coach for Indianapolis, pride of Everett, Mass. But he's telling his guys, he's a good quarterback. Okay, he's accurate, all that. Yep. But if we can make him uncomfortable, it's going to lead to stuff like this. And they flash to a scene from the All-22 that he's showing his players where he's throwing an ear pick against the Titans, I think it was. You know, Frank Reich, ahead of that game, is all about, we need to pressure this quarterback, because if we pressure this quarterback and if we make him uncomfortable, we're going to be okay. I think that's proven true, especially in the latter portion of the year. And he finished the regular season, guys, as the second most frequently blitzed quarterback in the NFL. That doesn't happen by accident. It's a copycat league. Teams see that they can get after Mac Jones a little bit, make him uncomfortable, and you have a better chance of him making a mistake. And until he proves that he can hurt teams when they decide to do that, he's going to continue to see that. The Bills are going to blitz him. When the Bills were here at Gillette Stadium, 2 out of the first 3 snaps of the game, they blitzed him. He got one bad, ugly, basically throwaway on a sort of a screen attempt, and 1 sack when he was blitzed. To start that game, I thought he was sped up the rest of the game. He ends up with some awful, just heinous numbers through the air at home against a really good defense. Same thing's going to happen this weekend. To me, I can't explain it other than I think he's tired. National championship, getting ready for the draft, quarterback competition, seasons on your shoulders as a rookie for a storied franchise, and you're essentially replacing Tom Brady. It's a lot to deal with. And I think he's kind of gotten to the end of his rope to a degree, which again is why I say if they go anywhere this year, it's going to be because of the defense and because of the running game and because they take care of the football. He has to be able to do that. He got an F from me on my report card. I'm a nobody. Never played the position. Not a coach.
That's not true, Phil.
Nobody. But that's the lowest grade he's gotten all year. I thought that was the worst game he's had all year, was in Miami, because he turned it over twice. Mm-hmm. He put points on the board for the other team. He took points off the board for his team when he fumbled that snap. And in what is essentially a 3-point game, I know they scored at the very, very end, but that was a 3-point game, and he gave them at least 10,
right?
Maybe 14. And you're the starting quarterback of a playoff team. He's a rookie. I get it. Overall, it's been a great season for the year, for the franchise, for the organization, big picture. It's a good year because I think you found your quarterback. But you are still the quarterback of a playoff team, of a team that wanted to contend right away because of all the money that you spent in free agency this offseason. Not just compete, but truly contend. And the way they're playing right now, they can't contend. And if they lose in the wild card round, they were not contenders. And that, to me, there's been a lot of discussion at our station and in other places. Has this been a successful season? I think big picture, because I think you found your quarterback. Sure. But given where they were in the middle of the season and given where my expectations were for them, where they were situated for this team when they left Buffalo that day as the number 1 seed in the conference, if they don't win a playoff game, it's hard for me to call this a successful season, because this team was built to win today, right now. I know they're still maybe technically a rebuilding team, but when you spend that kind of money and you put this team together after a 7-9 season, they had no appetite for being a mediocre team. And to me, a wild card round exit is mediocre team. You're not a good team. 2019. At that point. You're more of a mediocre team.
Right. I agree. All right. So I think that's a great conversation there, man. Dark Blue Gold, commenting up a storm. We appreciate it. I think he's right. We're definitely seeing some sort of rookie wall here after a long season. And, 17-game season. So I can see that too, Mm-hmm. But one thing I wanted to chat with you about, and we're running a little bit long here, so we're going to let you go in a bit. But, during the game on Sunday night, which was an unbelievable game, during the game on Sunday night, I texted our group chat and I just said, is it weird that I'm rooting for the Raiders to win because I want to play the Bills? And here's my reasoning, right? I think the Patriots are going to be underdogs in both games. I think the Cincinnati matchup would have been a really difficult matchup, as the Bills are a really difficult matchup as well. But and I'm going to pull up this tweet here, or this comment here. Jay Spence was on our show when we previewed the Bills last time. He's a guy from Buffalo Rumblings over at on SB Nation over there. New England taking this out, right? I love Jay Spence. He's a good guy. But how amazing would it be if the Patriots were to walk into Buffalo on Saturday night and walk out with a victory when the Bills thought, nope, this is our division. Brady's gone. We went to the AFC Championship game last year. We're all set. We won the division 2 years in a row. And the Patriots walk in with a rookie quarterback in what is essentially year one of the rebuild and beat you at home in your place in the playoffs. To me, it's unlikely because I don't think they're going to win, but I think it's certainly possible. And to me, beating Buffalo would be so much more sweet than beating Cincinnati. And so that's why I was rooting for the Raiders to win.
It would be more sweet for Patriots fans, I think, right? To beat the Bills in Buffalo, bury Bills Mafia, right? And honestly, was it Jay Spence? Is he the Buffalo guy?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how Jay Spence was feeling specifically after that loss in Buffalo, but I talked to Ty Dunn, who, he writes for a website called Go Long. That's his site. He, in my opinion, he's one of the best football writers we have in the country. Really tapped in, but covered the Bills for a long time, and is still tapped in. And I remember hearing from him soon after that Buffalo game, and it was everything you're saying now was something that was already being felt in Buffalo at that point in time after that loss. It was embarrassing. They got beat up. They were out physicaled. They're a soft team. And Bill Belichick just came in and he clowned you. He clowned you, Buffalo. And people were upset with not just the team, but with the head coach and their ability to, I think, mentally withstand the things that the Patriots were throwing at them. So the discourse out of Buffalo after that game was dramatic as hell. I mean, it was like the sky was falling.
We talked about it here.
Yeah.
That Bills, the Bills beat reporters are the most irrational group of beat reporters I've ever seen because they buried that team. Like 5 minutes after the game was over. They
Unbelievable.
Not a single. I mean, everybody in the country saw Jerry. Blanking on the name, but asking Jerry Sullivan asking Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer if they were embarrassed. Like that's the kind of people we're dealing with. So I think no matter what, that group of people, they're going to be irrational about it.
I think they saved their season second half of the Bucs game. Like to lose, to then get embarrassed by the Patriots at home and then get embarrassed by Tom Brady the next weekend. I think they would have been done. They would have tanked. And they came, credit to them, they were getting blown out in that. They were getting embarrassed in the first half, and they came out in the second half and they fought their asses off and almost won that game. But even though they lost, it was enough for them to like take a deep breath and be like, okay, we're fine. Like we're not dead. We're fine. And so, I think that for them, that to me, I thought saved their season.
And they carried that momentum into Gillette Stadium.
Yep.
Right. And they put together their best game. So credit to them. After getting embarrassed the way they did, they bounced back. They still win the division. They're the ones hosting the playoff game, not the Patriots.
Right.
And so they should feel good about where they're at right now. To me, the Bengals was the better matchup because I think outside of the receiving weapons that Cincinnati has, Buffalo's the better team. I mean, they've got the better quarterback. I think they've got the better coach. They've got the better offensive line. They have far and away the better defense.
And the coach. So, the coach is the biggest one for me. I mean, I think Bill Belichick coaches circles around Zach Taylor.
Yeah. So to me, it would have been Cincinnati, and that I think, you might get some elements in that game too that would favor you. Cincinnati isn't necessarily Orlando this time of year, so I think you'd be in a good spot there. But Buffalo's not unbeatable. I think the Patriots, again, if they play a clean game, and I'll keep saying it, I've said it after just about every single one of these Patriots losses, their mistakes are not that hard to correct. It's not that hard not to line up over the center on a punt.
Right.
It's not that hard to not throw a pick six on the first drive of the game. Like the defense, as bad as they were in certain moments, and they were not good, they did give up 20 points in an NFL game in 2021. Like that.
Right.
That should be enough for you to win a football game when you're not playing, necessarily the best defense in the league. So I think they can win this game. And I think if the weather's bad enough, and I'll be there. So if I'm cranky enough, if I'm having a bad enough time outside at Orchard Park and I'm just miserable because the weather's that bad, maybe I'll pick the Patriots. I can't say that'll be my choice right now as we sit here, but we'll see how bad it gets. If it's snowing and it's sleeting and it's hail and it's pelting my face on pregame live before the game, which it was, and I'm just pissed off at everybody and I'm screaming at Matt Castle and I'm screaming at Tom Curran, like maybe I'll pick the Patriots because they're better suited to play in those types of conditions. Yeah. I just think Buffalo's more talented right now, and the Patriots, the way they're playing, if they can't play mistake-free, it's hard for them to beat anybody. So, they've just got to sort of dial it up in terms of their focus.
Yeah. I agree with you. We won't make you choose. We won't make you pick. We usually do game predictions at the end of the show.
I mean, right now I would say I would pick the Bills. But again, if the weather gets really bad, I'll pick the Patriots. But I think it'll probably be relatively low scoring. I'm going to say Bills like 17-13.
Okay.
What a gross game. I love it.
That'd be awful. It'd be fantastic. It'd be awful.
The more disgusting, the better, in my opinion.
What do you think, Keegan? What's your prediction?
I said 26-20 earlier on another podcast, so I got to stick to that. Buffalo.
Okay. Spags?
I think this goes to overtime.
Woo!
Patriots come up a little short. Yeah, I think it'll be a tight game. I think.
Do they play for the tie, Spags? Do they play for the tie?
Yeah. They go college style after like 5 overtimes. They say, screw it. No, I think it'll be a tight game just because of the familiarity. I think the weather will be a factor. I just think it'll, like you said, it'll come down to a game of inches. Who's going to execute better, similar to that first game. And they were mentally tough then. Have they been since then? Not really. So their character and everything else will be tested this week. But I think they come up short. I don't think this team's quite there yet. I think they're still a year or two away, which nothing wrong with that. But I think they're not there yet. They're not on the Bills level, unfortunately.
I'm gonna make it.
I hope I'm wrong.
I'm gonna make it a clean sweep and hope for a bad vibes game for the Bills with all of us picking the Bills here. So we'll see. But I mean, I agree with kind of what everyone said. Like they're just not quite there yet. They're close. They're just not quite there yet. And the way that the Patriots defense has been playing, they're not, we talked about 0-1 and how like 0-1, the defense really bailed the Patriots out of a few of those situations. And of course, Brady had that, great drive at the end of the Super Bowl and, whatever. But like for the most part, it was the defense that carried that team. And the way this defense is playing, they can't carry this team right now. And maybe at some point they will. And I know, you keep saying they only gave up 20 points against Miami, which is true. It's a bad offense that they shouldn't be giving up 20 points against with long extended drives, unable to stop the run. They haven't been able to stop the run really all year long. So those are the things for me that I worry about because, now twice against Miami now, after the Damian Harris fumble and after you scored there, you had a shot where if you stop Miami, you get the ball back, you're able to win the game. Both with around 3.5 minutes left to go in the game, and you couldn't do it, And so, of course, like it's one drive. Like you say, okay, it's just one drive. But, I mean, your season comes down to one drive. Can the Patriots defense make a stop? And they have shown consistently that they can't.
Well, and their defense just has to bail them out. Like,
right.
They're not in that situation in the first place if the quarterback has a better game, right?
Yep.
They're not in that situation in the first place. The first game, if Damian Harris doesn't fumble.
Yes.
But, they are a team that needs their defense to be next level. It needs to be able to say, no big deal. You guys make a mistake or two on the other side, we'll pick you up.
Right.
We'll be okay. But I'm not sure. I think they're good. I'm not sure they're that good.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right, Phil. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, everyone knows this anyways, but you got to tell us, where they can read you and see you and hear you and everything else. And we love your coverage. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it, and always love having you on the show.
Of course, guys. Thank you for having me. You can find all of our stuff, or all of my stuff, I should say, at NBCSportsBoston.com. You can find pretty much anything, whether it's video that we post to the website, links to our podcast, whether it's the Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast or the Next Pats podcast, at Phil A. Perry on Twitter. We've got a great Next Pats episode, I will say, coming at you in the next 24 hours or so. We're going to have Kurt Warner back with us.
Oh, baby.
He was with us a few months ago, started the season, about a month in, to talk all things Mac Jones. And he has a lot of thoughts on Mac Jones. And he said at the end of our podcast, he said, hey, check in with me at the end of the year. We'll see how far he's come. And maybe my opinion will have changed. So we'll get Kurt Warner on the podcast and we'll see where he's at on Mac Jones at this point in the year going into the postseason. But yeah, at Phil A. Perry on Twitter, on Instagram, same deal, at Phil A. Perry. So I appreciate people checking us out there.
That's great. And by the way, I would like to mention, Dark will go with a great comment here. I would like to mention that the OG Phil Perry used to block you on Twitter, but we rectified that situation like a year and a half ago. Do you remember this? Like, wasn't the original Phil Perry like some musician or something like that?
Oh, R&B legend.
Yes, there you go. See? And I'm pretty sure he had you blocked, and then we got him to unblock you. I believe. I'm fairly certain that's the case.
I remember this. He blocked me because he was getting a lot of like Patriots questions to the account. And he was like, I'm done. I can't do it. This is Phil Perry, again, legend. If you ever go back, go and Google this right now if you're listening to the podcast. Google the Goof Troop theme song.
All right.
Phil Perry absolutely slays that song. It is unbelievable. The vocal talent that this guy has. By far and away the most talented Phil Perry on the planet right now.
Great name.
Honored to share a name with that guy. But he's been at it for a long time. I remember my 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. I feel like everybody did that at some point in time.
Yep.
We went to, Spags and Keegan are like, what are you talking about? Number one.
I finished 8th grade in Texas. We went to the Alamo.
Oh,
it was terrible.
The
Alamo stinks.
That's kind of fast. But we went to a Strawberry Records, which you guys have no idea what that is. Pat,
God,
Spags,
yes,
you have no clue. Strawberry Records, and I remember seeing Phil Perry like just everywhere. Phil Perry CDs along the wall. I'm like, this guy, I need to get in on this guy. I need to know who this guy is. But yeah, I think he did have me blocked, and he was like tired of answering like, why aren't the Patriots using more 12 personnel? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Get out of my face.
It's great. It's good stuff. So, well, thank you, Phil. We appreciate it, man. And hopefully we'll hope for a win on Saturday night. But either way, it was a heck of a season, and and we'll hope for an even better season next year. Right?
Hey, if we're not talking playoff football next time we talk, we'll be talking draft, or we'll be talking
That's right.
agency. So whatever it is, there's always something. There's always something with this team. So I'm sure I'll talk to you guys soon.
I said to one of my coworkers today, I'm already looking forward to the draft. And she was like, the playoffs are still. I'm like, I know, but I'm already looking forward to the draft. And she's like, you're a lunatic. I'm like, yeah,
a lot of talent in that national championship.
Sure is. Oh, it sure was.
Talent there.
Oh, boy. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll